It should have started. Yeah, it started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kubernetes SIG network meeting for Thursday, June 5th. As always, this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, boiling down effectively to be nice to one another, so please do be nice to one another. Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom when you want to ask a question or interject, as that helps us to kind of keep things flowing nicely. It is an open agenda meeting. We have three topics on the agenda today. If you'd like to add one, please feel free to add one to the doc. If we can get to it today, we will. If not, we can always bump it to the next meeting. And with that, I'll share my screen and we'll get started.
We have a relatively light agenda today too, which is nice.
We do. Can you see my screen? And I actually did some pre-gaming of triage in the last hour because I had an open hour this last hour. So we have 3 items. So let's
for what it's worth, I loaded up to, there's a total of like 7 that are currently marked as needs triage, which is amazing. If anybody it has an issue that was assigned to them, please go look at them.
Yes,
including
please.
myself.
I'll double check that I'm not assigned to any after this, or whether I am. Okay, so first one first. This one a couple of days ago, service conflict when using cluster IP port 31,000 and node port services using the same port. We're experiencing an intermission issue when using this port, becomes inaccessible, fails to function properly. Upon investigation, typically happens when another user in the cluster creates a node port service that also uses port 31,000. Seems to be a conflict. And then I didn't actually look at this one. I looked it over like briefly and saw at the end and pinged Dan about it. But I think what I heard from what seems like Antonio said and what Dan's saying is this is like a known issue in IPVS. So I think this comment still stands. Oh, I didn't catch this comment. Does anybody have anything else to add to this one?
Where did it say they're using IPVS? I didn't know.
Yeah, they don't say, but the config says IPVS mode.
Well, it also it does say IPVS mode.
Yeah, go up.
Oh, there you go. Yes, I missed it. I saw the IP tables config and I assumed it was IP tables. Okay.
No, because I know that IP tables, the net filter data path in the one that goes to the local host is not going to capture the traffic. But I know that large service requires something with this because the IPVS binds to the virtual IP or something like that.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that causes. But I'm just talking from memory.
What do we need to do? Who do we need to get involved?
So let me ask even a more meta question than that. Is anybody here still feeling ownership over IPVS? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I was guessing no.
That's not a happy situation because we know we have users of IPVS. So either we need to volunteer to learn about IPVS and answer these sorts of questions, and possibly to help end of life it. Like if we're not going to maintain it anymore, if NF tables is GA and we think it's better in every way, we need to start a campaign of messaging that, you know, IPVS is has fallen into disrepair and the better option is NF tables. NF tables is probably better than IP tables for most people too, but IPVS is known to be problematic.
That's let me share. Dan Winship open a cap exactly about that.
Okay.
Okay, he's faster than me. Oh, the phone. Okay. You have it in chat, and I think like all the caps from Dan are really good to read.
Yeah, so part of this is we have to figure out what we're doing with IPVS and when.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the longer we let this fester, the more problematic it's going to be. More people are going to hit more edge cases over time. The fact that this is, you know, sort of new doesn't instill confidence that it's the last one.
Oh, and there is another funny thing with the Windows proxy that Dan, Dan he promoted to conformance or is trying to promote to conformance. I don't remember exactly which it says. And the Windows proxy is not passing. We are not able to figure out what they're failing. And that more on the line of we have proxies that are not well supported.
Yes. At least Windows, we can say like this is relegated to a relatively small corner of our space and has a company that at least nominally is responsible for it. Nobody is responsible for IPVS at this point. Lars, we miss you if you're watching the recordings. I hope you're enjoying your retirement. Don't give us any mind.
Cheers,
in fact, I
Lars.
hope Lars is not watching the recordings. Please do not watch the recordings. I mean, Dan, I think we should move somewhat aggressively on this.
So the KEP, it says work in progress at the top, but that's just because the KEP is only half written because we have to make a whole bunch of decisions before I can even finish writing the KEP. So people should go and review that and put your opinions in on things.
Right.
But as for bugs, Antonio and I have been for the past few months, and Lars for that matter, writing on IPVS bugs. Hey, you should try out NF tables mode and see if it solves your problems. And if it does, then stop using IPVS. So
Okay. So can you write that on this bug?
sure.
With regard to KEPs, I should apologize. I've been a little bit absent. I've just been crazy the last couple of weeks. I'm going to try to spend the majority of the rest of this week and next week reading and reviewing KEPs. Dan, if this one's really important, don't let me forget. Please, like, if it comes to like Tuesday and I haven't said something about it, please ping me and we'll talk about it in real time next week.
Okay. I mean, it's another one that's sort of this is going to take us a really long time to do. So if it misses PRR freeze, it's not the end of the world.
But also, if it's going to take a really long time, the sooner we start, the better, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to wait another 4 months to accumulate 4 more months of IPVS problem reports. I would rather start, even if it's just a campaign of messaging of like, hey, did you know IPVS mode is soft deprecated? Like, there's a better alternative and it's known to be buggy. We got to find the right words for it. Okay.
We did actually say that in the blog post about NF tables becoming GA, which went out with 1.33.
Yeah, that's not a good enough place to be messaging this. We need to put it in the Kubernetes release notes.
Roger that.
For the sake of focusing on IPVS, would it make sense to split that piece out of this KEP and have a deprecate IPVS only KEP just so we can iterate faster?
I think that's a good call. If we're all on board with IPVS deprecation, then just doing that as one single thing does sound good.
So, but part of that is do we want to declare IPVS to be deprecated now if people aren't going to have new enough kernel versions to run NF tables? They all sort of tie together. I don't know. Add comments to the KEP if you think we should split it out.
Deprecated doesn't mean removed, right? Deprecated means we're warning you that this thing is out of favor and we think IP tables has less bugs and NF tables is better in every way. So one of those two options should work for most people.
Roger that. So it sounds like we need more review on this KEP, and Dan, you're going to put a comment on the issue, kind of giving a little update about the state of things and how it relates to this PR. And that should be good to go forward for now then, yeah?
Dan, has anyone, when you recommended using NF tables, came back and said, oh, I can't do it?
I don't think we've gotten any feedback from anybody either way.
But the biggest likely problem is the kernel version, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't require that new a kernel. It's just that we allow people to use pretty old kernels right now.
We are relatively unopinionated about that, which is a nice place to be. All right. Sorry, Shane, you want to move on?
Yeah, no worries. This one, I actually looked at this one right before this meeting because I had a little time before this meeting. So in this one, they had kubeadm init test failed. What they did was they ran init with this pod setter and then this control plane endpoint. And then the controller manager crashed, the scheduler crashed. I looked at it briefly before this meeting. They're running it on GCP. And I think what they might be doing is just like, they're just doing a single node on a GCP VM, and this is the VM's IP. Do GCP VMs have, like, if you're on a GCP VM, does that have hairpin, Nat?
It yes, for its primary IP, it should be fine. It should be actually
Okay.
installed as an IP on the. Wait. No.
Because what I
that's
thought
not-
might be happening is this is like, okay, this is the VM's IP, which means, yeah, I can get nodes and I can get pods. I can talk to the API server, but everything's crashing because it can't talk to itself.
Yeah,
via that
for the
IP,
nodes,
so-
GCP nodes have sort of an automatic one-to-one NAT, which might be different. I don't know that I've ever tried for a node to talk to its own external IP. That is
Okay.
an interesting question. I can go test it. Good observation there.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple minutes. It's hard when you're like in the middle of this meeting to try to like, because you're just like, but I had like a couple minutes and I was like, oh, I think it's that. So I think that's what's happening. I'm happy to assign myself and try to talk. Are you trying to comment on there?
I was
I'll
just
add
going
it.
to run a.
Yeah, let
talking
me
to
know what you find. I'll assign
I'll do a
myself
quick.
to it and I'll.
Go ahead. I'll do a quick test while we're talking here because it should be easy.
Okay, sounds good. But I think that is what's going on, and it's fairly straightforward. And they'll just need to turn that on if that's the case. If that's a thing you can turn on. So then the next one is opened last month. Set container ready condition to false once liveness probe failed. I did not read this one ahead of time. I didn't get quite to this one.
This is complicated. So let me try to recover. They go to the last comments because the first comments there is a back and forth on load
You added
balancer.
a Google Doc as your last comment last week.
No, that's the comment from this person that is awesome. And I remember that thing has a similar one, and those I really love these diagrams because they explain the visual to understand the props and the states is really good. This is an environment. This person managed the networking application or something like that, and the problem is that when the liveness probe fails, the pod doesn't go unready, and during that time they experience disruption on the application. The person has controlled the readiness and the terminating endpoints, but he wants a solution that allows him to control the same for liveness. The problem is that when liveness fail, there is no indication he can hook to start to play with the load balancer or the application that he has. I know oversimplifying because I don't remember all the details, but the
So
bottom
when
line is that he wants something in liveness. Yes.
So when liveness fails, kubelet is going to restart it, right?
Yeah, and there is a period there that is the one.
Yeah,
that
I mean,
is problematic.
unfortunately, that's going to go through some of the grace period stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
It shouldn't, but it does, which is actually the whole point of that drawing. Antonio, you made my week by sending my own drawings to me.
Is your drawing?
Yes, I actually wasn't sure.
I knew that. I remember. I saw this. It's fantastic. Okay.
I wasn't sure.
I
I was like, this looks really familiar to me, and I had to go find the slide deck because I'd done it on my personal account so that I could share it with the web more easily. And I didn't put my name on it. So I went in and I was like, if this is mine, I'm gonna put my name on it. And I went back to the link that you sent me, and there's my name. Okay, so anyway, you made my week. But yeah, unfortunately, we do things in case of a liveness probe failing where we probably shouldn't, but we do because of the way the code was reused. And so it feels like a kubelet bug more than a networking bug. Like if you're going through liveness restart, you should be set pod readiness to false, right?
Yeah, but if you are in the grace period and you still want to, handle the termination, the thing is that I don't think that you can generalize and put together and say if Linus fails, ready automatically goes false.
That's, I mean, it's a question. I sort of assume that if liveness fails, you don't get your you shouldn't get your pre-stop. You shouldn't get your grace period. You should just be nuked from orbit
Oh,
instantly.
okay. So you say if Linus fails, you don't even have grace period already. It has
But
to
that's
fail.
not the world we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah,
So,
that okay.
um,
So you think that there are two liveness, the soft and the hard should automatically wipe out everything.
I mean, liveness probe is the way the pod says, "Look, I am not healthy. Get me back into something by killing me."
Right, but that's why I'm thinking in a web server, right?
Interesting phrase.
You stop serving new requests, but you still may want to finish the request that you're handling.
That okay? So liveness was originally added for things like you've hit a deadlock, right? Your application is no
Okay.
longer responding. Like grace period isn't useful to you. But it's certainly possible that I'm
You
not
you
sure what
have
the failure mode would be, but I can imagine.
a web server that exhausted all the resources and is not able to get new requests, right? But this is still able to finish the existing request. That used to happen, right?
In theory, sure, I guess. So the
Okay.
question is, which mode do we think it should be? And I don't really want to go and add another knob to configure this.
We still have, and now there is a new working group about the node life cycle, and they have
Yeah.
intersection with this, so we can
Well,
put.
I mean, maybe this goes to the retooling probes work too, right? Like maybe actually
Oh,
we
for
need a
that,
distinction
right?
between hard liveness and soft liveness.
So we put this into Surya, and then
That's right. We make Surya's problem. What do we want to do with
Oh,
this
man.
issue right now?
Is it so people moved it out of like needs information, but we need to decide it's a feature, right? We need to decide if we're accepting it. Sounds like we basically need to figure out how we're going to accept it.
I think that the person is also open to suggestions that give them the signal to say, now I'm in failing liveness, but I still not unready.
Roger that.
And I
Is
don't know
somebody
if there is
capable of
any
moving the conversation
condition.
forward?
I was checking on the existing conditions because we also have the C2E test with the sleep pre-hook. So maybe Ting has one of these awesome scripts that you have that you hook something into something that do something and signal the other person with a regex.
Huh?
I hook something into something and do something. That basically describes my whole career, Antonio.
No, with this, there are these clever things. I know you and David Porter that always using these pre-hooks and whatever thing with all this bash magic. So that's too complex for me. But I don't know if some trick like those can help this person. As to inject some of these pre-stop hooks or whatever thing.
Okay, Antonio, do you feel like you have this issue? Do you want me to read it and jump in?
I'm not. I exhausted my knowledge of props, and
Okay.
I don't want to know more about props. It's
All right,
a terrible.
I'll take a look. I'll take a look after meeting today.
All right. And that is it for those, and we can move on to the other topics. Rob, you want to talk about
Cool.
our illustrious Gateway API inference extension and the upcoming
Thank
API
you.
review.
Well, I am hoping that is right now, actually. So, is it possible to give me presenter access, whatever that means?
It is done.
Awesome, thank you. Hopefully this is the right thing. Hopefully this is visible to the world. Actually, one second. Inference pool is something that we are trying to get to GA ideally this summer, which is quite fast. And so, although we're not trying to get it to GA tomorrow, we think it is largely in the shape that is what we want to GA a few months from now, and thought it would be good to get a review, a pre-review out of the way now in case this group looks at it and says, you know what, we should really change this or that. I would hate to have that happen right before we're trying to get something across the line to GA. I'd rather, do an earlier review session to make sure that if we've missed anything, we catch it earlier than later. So that's the idea here. A couple terms I want to cover that we've started to use pretty broadly in this project is a term inference gateway. The way I think of inference gateway is basically take any existing implementation of Gateway API,
Only
adjust
Envoy.
it a bit. Well, okay. Let's discuss that a
Right.
bit later. But yes, but right now it is certainly easiest if you're an Envoy-based implementation of Gateway API to add inference extension support on top, and then you become an inference gateway. And what that does for you as a gateway implementation is it unlocks what I hope will be a large ecosystem of routing extensions that are AI focused. We have Endpoint Picker that is kind of a reference built into the project itself. There's another project that has emerged recently called LLMD that has its own variation of this. It's kind of closely tied with VLLM, and I expect others will emerge over time. And then there's the inference scheduler, and this is really meant to be this extensible component that is trying to make the decisions about which endpoint is optimal for a inference request to be routed to. So yeah, those are some terms. The API structure itself is fairly straightforward. This is just the same bit of Gateway API that we're familiar with. The difference is we're adding a new kind of backend, and we call that backend inference pool. And we're saying that inference pool is managed by a persona called inference platform owners. I think this diagram might help describe just a little bit of the flow that we think is going to be most common that we've seen. Someone sends a request to a gateway. That gateway does all the normal stuff it does. So it says, okay, what's the inference pool or the backend that this request should go to? So it looks at the gateway, the HTTP route, what matches this request. And then when it finds that group of endpoints, basically previously that group of endpoints would be a service, but now inference pool is also an option. The gateway forwards that request to and endpoint information to the extension, right? So it says, okay, I see this inference pool. This is where it should go, but this inference pool, before I route anything there, I need to send the request over here so it tells me what is the best endpoint right now to handle this specific request. So this endpoint picker has a lot of advanced logic. I'm sure each variation will be different, but the one that exists right now is very focused on a few things. One of them is prefix cache aware routing. So basically understanding which of the pods in this inference pool is best suited to serve a request that looks, like this, has this specific prompt, has, maybe maybe a pod served a similar request previously, and so would already have an easier time responding to a request. And so this extension sends back that IP port back to the gateway, and the gateway goes ahead and sends that request to the pod selected by the extension. This is, obviously a model that is not going to be very compelling if you're, dealing with thousands of QPS and you expect each request to complete in a few milliseconds. But in the wild world of routing to LLM workloads, we generally expect each request to be fairly long-lived. And so the performance improvements you can get with a model like this can be very significant. I don't want to get too far into them because it's really dependent on the logic contained within the endpoint picker itself. But what we're focused on is a model that allows this logic to exist, this logic to be offloaded. One other thing I'll mention is that endpoint picker itself is doing some kind of out of band metric scraping, or it depends on, this is what I would call an implementation detail. I think every endpoint picker that exists today is doing metric scraping, but there could be other ways that metrics were attained by endpoint picker to make these kinds of decisions. But yeah, this is a lot. Are there any questions on how this works before I get into the API itself?
A small question. Did we ever end up with a simple description of what an inference pool is? I heard for a while it was like it's a service for model serving pods. But it's a little more than that.
Spent a lot of time refining the docs for inference pool, so hopefully we do now. But that's a really good question.
Because I think if you look at it right now, it's like it is a service sort of, but it's also the declaration of where your endpoint picker is, which is kind of an implementation detail part that makes it a little weird for me for going GA, like saying that you have to, here's the service that you use, here's your ext proc service is what it's saying in the spec right now, which doesn't like super tightly bind it to Envoy, but it's pretty well bound to Envoy with that. We can talk more about the whole like Envoy thing later, but that's one of the first questions that I have are like, are we heading in a direction where we won't be super tightly bound to Envoy? And do we have kind of a simple thing that like, can the pool be made more simple? And can the whole Envoy bit, the whole extension proc bit be something that's a separate API or done separately? Just questions that I have.
Yeah, that's fair. We will get into that. I think I think it's worth revisiting that a little bit later in this discussion because probably a chunk of people on this call don't have the context of what the API looks like yet.
Yeah, that's fair. Sounds good. And also note that we do have, AJ has a topic, so time check will be at 50 after to give AJ 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Unless AJ, you think you need more, you can get 15 minutes.
Thank you. I think that should be for the start.
Okay, cool.
Great. Cool. So there's two personas that we have really identified in this project. One is inference platform admin. This is one that creates and manages the infrastructure necessary to run LLM workloads. Hardware, resource allocation, model server, base model, etc. That is what is covered by inference pool today. Inference workload owner is a different persona that we think exists, but is actually covered by a different API surface that we're mostly ignoring in the purpose of this review. I'll dig into that a little bit more, but the workload owner owns the actual AI workloads and really manages objectives, fine-tuning, LoRa adapters if they're using LoRa, system prompts, etc., and rolling out updates to those things. Now, why are we only focusing on inference pool here? We believe this is the most stable part of API, right? The inference pool is a mechanism that allows gateways to have a stable target to develop against and unlock the world of endpoint pickers, right? You have a I think the overall pattern is quite stable now for calling out to these things that we call endpoint pickers. But how we actually configure the endpoint pickers and how we set objectives for them is decidedly more in flux. There's a lot of innovation still happening in that space. Projects like LLMD are moving quickly. They're built on top of this foundation. And there's a proposal that I think these slides are open and linked in the agenda. If you want to click through, there's a proposal that could meaningfully change inference model, which is the API that currently exists for this persona. So this part of it could still shift, and I think it makes sense to let that continue to iterate until we're more confident in it. So, if you look at the Gateway API graduation criteria, which we've been using as a reference here for when we think an API is ready, we require that there's full conformance test coverage in place. That's seen a lot of progress over the past few weeks, and we expect that to complete later this month. Also require multiple conformant implementations. I'm hoping we can hit that target sometime in July. The implementations we're tracking here are Istio, GK Gateway, and K Gateway. Maybe there will be others. There are a couple more that implement the API right now. So we'll see. Widespread implementation and usage. Currently have 5 implementations, and there are customers and users that have been providing feedback.
Was I wrong that Envoy's AI Gateway already or was working on support for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're one of the ones I'm counting as 5, and when I've talked with them, it seems like they have a longer path to get to conformance. I think it's possible, but I don't want to overcommit. None of this is certain. It's just what I think is likely at this point. And then the other requirement is that we have at least 6 months of soak time as an alpha API. That will be true in August. So, that's kind of the ones that are somewhat easier to control. The ones that we're trying to address in today's meeting are, no significant changes for at least 1 minor release in 3 months, and approval from sub-project owners and KEP reviewers, which is this group here. So this all depends on what feedback we get today, and we'll go from there. So the inference platform owner, this is really like, what were we trying to fit into inference pool, right? And so what we have now is a way to select a set of pods. So we expect these pods to run the same LLM framework, model server framework, share the same base model, and generally be capable of running the same set of adapters if they're using LoRa. Now, the other thing is you need to be able to select the port that should be targeted on those pods. And we want this resource to be the thing that routes and policies target. It's basically, this is a backend type. The other thing that Shane kind of alluded to earlier is this is also where we've added configuration for the endpoint selection extension. The entire idea of this API is that the only way a request should get to to an inference pool, is what we call it, is to go through this endpoint selection extension thing. If a request gets here without going through that, we've kind of missed the whole point. And so that's why we've kept that at the same level as a critical piece of the API. There's a lot of future theoretical things in here. When you look at this API right now, you'll say, well, hey, this is really generic, right? This could fit anywhere. This is a very generic use case, and I think that's fair. What I want to leave room for in this API is very inference specific configuration, whether that's something like GPU or TPU sharing, some default objectives, what metrics. There's a lot in here, and I really want to leave room for inference specific configuration in this API, even though that's fairly limited right now. before I keep on going, any questions here? I want to leave room for discussion.
Yeah. So I was going to comment on what you were just saying, that this API seems very abstract, not at all AI specific. You have a service that has strong requirements about endpoint selection, and you provided a generic API for selecting endpoints. And Tim has been talking about that for years. Every time topology comes up about, oh, what if a smart service proxy had some better algorithm for using metrics and stuff to figure out what endpoints to choose. And now you're providing that. So it seems weird to say that theoretically in the future, we might want to make this very generic API be very AI specific. So we're going to start out by calling it AI specific, even though it's not.
That's fair.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
I think that's good feedback. We're stuck with a balancing act as owners of Kubernetes API surface, and one of the things we've maybe gone too far the other way on in the past is we have started with an API that is generic, and then we've added a bunch of not generic things on top, right? And the interaction has been really awful and less than ideal, and confusing. And so what I am suggesting would be useful here is, since we know, the world of inference and routing to inference is large. There's a lot of very real requirements here that we're aware of, and having an API that leaves room for those specific cases, instead of what we've found in service is, well, there's no room for this because it doesn't apply to these other things. So you start with something really generic, but then the second you have something that isn't generic, then you have to create another like policy or something off to the side to extend it, right? Because it can't fit in the core thing. And that's what I'm trying to avoid here. We know there's a really long runway of features and configuration that are inference specific here. I'd rather have an API that can hold those instead of starting with something that is generic from the start and then requires us to, push everything to the side.
Yeah, Rob spoke to what I was going to speak to a little bit here, because I agree with you, Dan. Like, I don't like that, but I also see the reality that we already have this long daisy chain of APIs that you have to do all the way down to inference pool. And then we already, not in what we're trying to push for GA, but we also have this weird right now model API that is basically a policy backwards attached to the inference pool. So if we have like 3 issues right now. I opened one in like 2020 for like load balancing routing algorithm extension points. And Kellen, I think, who's one of the maintainers of this, has the most recent one to try to make that more generic and like pluggable. But I think we'll almost naturally just end up having even more object references, which I think is what Rob was trying to say. And so I see both sides, and I'm not actually sure what the best thing to do is. But I definitely don't, as strongly as I feel about like I would like to see this made generic, I also do actually believe that the inference pool will eventually have more inference specific things. So I kind of agree with Rob on the whole, we're just going to end up with this nest. So this is, if we don't add another thing now, it'll save us time and reduce having one more object ref or many more.
Who was next? Was it Danian or was it me? I think Danian, you were up before me.
Yeah, I just threw my comment in the chat window. Just a small caveat to add. Rob mentioned that all matching requests for endpoints of the inference pool must be routed to the endpoint picker extension. And just a small caveat is when failure mode open is configured and a failure event occurs, that the gateway implementation routes directly to the endpoints of that pool.
Yeah, thanks for that. To help that make sense, here's an example of all the fields filled in, and we do have an optional fail open mode. And if that's the case, then it's up to the gateway or whatever to decide what it does, given the lack of guidance from an endpoint picker, if the endpoint picker is unavailable for some reason. Tim?
So Dan, you cited, my past thoughts. I do see a distinction between this local service proxy and this as a gateway implementation. And I just wanted to call that out. But the thing that concerns me the most, and I haven't talked about this a lot because I've really been chewing on how to think about it. I feel like as a project, we are trying to find ways to fit the needs of AI users into the things we're already doing, rather than adapting hard enough and fast enough. And I'm beginning to worry that we have a velocity problem in that we're not seeing we're not feeling the urgency of the bigger picture. And so for that reason, I've leaned towards okay on this. I see the same problem, right? It feels very general, but I'm also okay with trying to solve a specific problem in a specific domain and then maybe looking for the generality later. That's my thinking on this so far.
I agree very much with we need to be very sensitive to our velocity on this.
Cool. All right. Well, I know I only have 4 minutes left, so I will try and be quick here.
Yeah, I was just gonna put my hand up to tell you that.
Yeah. Thanks. So inference pool looks like this in its current state. This is kind of the minimum config that's required. You set a target port. This is the target port on pods. And then a selector. This is a pod selector. Basically, here's the backends. Go select them. And then an extension ref, which is a pointer to that extension that we've been talking about. Yeah, there's a few more things that are optional here. You can add a group and a kind. Those are both defaulted to service. And you can optionally configure a failure mode, which is defaulted to fail close right now. That's the API as it exists right now. There are, I think we've already talked about why not service, so I'm not going to spend too much more time there. You can kind of see the overlap here of like, yes, there is some overlap between inference pool and service, but I really, really want to highlight that we think there's going to be meaningful inference config here. And I hate to, over optimize by this is generic right now, so it must be generic forever. I think we have a very clear roadmap of inference features coming down the pipeline. The other thing, this is a variation of the same line of thinking. Why not just use service and then add a policy on top of it or some kind of extension on top of that? I have some points. There's a really detailed discussion. If you really want to dig into it, there's a link here in the presentation. But given our time, I won't go too deep there. And the last thing I want to come back to, well, actually, any last questions before I? Yeah, I know
You go ahead first. You go ahead first.
Shane, I want to come back to the thing that you raised earlier. Right now, the way that we call
okay,
out
that's what I was gonna.
Okay, all right. So the way we call out, like steps 2 and 3, are really recycling Envoy's xproc mechanism. I believe that, well, more than believe, I know that the same idea is possible with anything that supports proxy WASM. And so one of the things that we have in our roadmap for this is to have a detailed guide and kind of show how, if you're based on Nginx, if you're Kong, if you're someone else, here's how you can support this same protocol, basically.
This is what I was gonna get at. So I actually, full disclosure, work on LLMD, and we're fine with EXT proc. But I think that everybody that's working on GAIE today is fine with EXTproc, and we need to, kind of similar to the reasons that you were mentioning, Tim, velocity is one thing, but inclusion is another. We can go as fast as we want, but if we don't include enough people, then we end up with something that won't stand the test of time. I would really like to see us detach ourselves from this we are very Envoy oriented thing and get at least one other conformant implementation of this before we go GA. I don't know if I'm not saying we need to make that a requirement. That's what I would like to see. But the problem that I see with EXTproc in its current state and the inference pool going GA is that the extension ref is all about EXTproc. And you don't necessarily have to architect your routing that way. Somebody could, in theory, plug in the WASM module or something like that. It doesn't need to be an external service that gets called out to necessarily as part of their architecture. So I think that causes problems for us with going to GA because it kind of binds them. It's like, what if an implementation comes along and has a gateway that everything is done in one process? There is no extension ref. There is nothing out there. The API feels weird then. Not to say that we can't move forward with that, but we should think about it.
Yeah, I'll drop some links in chat. I know I've passed time. The one thing I would say, Shane, I agree with the goal of we need to show that this can work if you're not based on Envoy. Since none of us control any non-Envoy based implementations, I would hate to, require some unspecified implementation to reach conformant status. But I think as long as we show this is how you can write one, that seems, and it's viable and we're not tied to Envoy, that seems sufficient for me. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it's two-sided. We need to extend the hand out to the non-Envoy implementations, but they need to grab that hand, and they haven't quite done that yet. So that it's a problem. Just for the longevity of this thing and being inclusive and making sure that we have the best possible thing to make Kubernetes the place that people do inference workloads. We just got to think about these things. Anyway, we need to let AJ go.
Yeah, I want to call for time.
Can you put together a PR so we can continue discussions async?
PR for just reviewing inference pool,
or maybe
or
a
on
Docker.
Xproc?
Yeah, like continue this. I think it's going to be a while before we have a chance for all of us in this group to get together. So if there's some way we can continue this conversation async so that it doesn't take weeks before we get back to it, I think that would be good.
Yep, sounds good.
And with that, AJ, let's go right to yours.
Right,
I'll
thanks
share
so
my
much,
screen
Shane.
again. Yeah.
Could you please share permissions for me to share my screen?
Sure. There you go.
Also, sorry, at the end, I need like 1 minute to talk about when we're going to meet next because there's some holidays coming up.
Roger that.
All right, starting with my screen share. Hope it's visible. Okay, I'm short on time. I just wanted to quickly discuss a proposal we have from SIG node. It's been provisionally accepted at SIG node and being discussed with SIG scheduling and SIG auto scaling. It's about extending nodes ready condition to be more declarative. What does it mean? So kubelet today has like a simple ready signal. It says like ready equal to true, which means that kubelet and the runtime are ready and some CNI config is present at the node. We feel that like this ready condition is essential, but is often insufficient to capture the state of the node or ability to run complex application workloads right away. So this is primarily, we look at one of the primary use cases for this is networking readiness, giving more complex nature of the network related workloads like a DNS or service proxy or multiple layers that needs to be functioning at the node before general workloads to be able to be scheduled on the node. I think I wanted to discuss this with SIG networking to make sure that like the design in its shape meets the networking use cases, or it's all included to make sure that we're all on the same page. I will quickly go over the proposal to not waste time on the preset. So the goal is to have the declarative mechanism for node to signal readiness, basically like allowing user to provide what node readiness mean for the node to be accepting pods to be scheduled on the node or assigned on the node. It's basically an extension to the ready condition today. It doesn't replace the ready condition, which essentially means infrastructure readiness to us. Like it doesn't change the SLOs for when the node is up or the kubelet or the runtime is functional. This basically is for more higher level application awareness or like readiness. This targets two things primarily. One is for the scheduling correctness, when scheduler could assign pods on the nodes that we discussed, and the other one is giving better node observability. Like failures should be like monitored directly on the node, and it also have like other side benefits like SIG auto scaling. Autoscaler could be able to scale up more efficiently or consider when to spin up new nodes, whether like the existing pods are like scheduled on the node after it is ready and it didn't like prematurely spin up new nodes. So those kind of like side events are also targeted on this. Going on to the quick API changes. So on the node spec, there would be a new field called readiness gates, which could take the conditions that use it mean the node to be ready before accepting pods. One sample example here would be network Kubernetes IO Cilium ready or CNI ready. This would need to be set, or this condition needs to be updated by the corresponding component. It could be an external controller or an operator, or it could be like a sidecar on the agent in itself that could patch this status to be ready once it is operational. And there would be an entity like a core Kubernetes entity that could watch these conditions, would identify that like, okay, this readiness is met. It basically would match the status conditions with the spec readiness gates to realize the readiness is satisfied. Once that is realized, the scheduler would be signaled that like its node is available for scheduling. That's the whole idea behind it. This is the core API that I would like to discuss. And one common question this proposal receives is like how it is different from taint. First is the semantic difference. Like taint says like what to repel, what pods shouldn't go on the node. Readiness gates is more on the positive affirmation on like when pods could be scheduled on the node, like what are the specific readiness requirements that need to be met before like scheduling could start for the node. I think like I can go into discussing more later as needed. Since this is not like API review, I would target this more on the quick design overview and then the networking specific aspects that I wanted to talk about. So we discussed
just a
like
heads up,
couple of
AJ, that we do have 2 minutes, and we definitely, I'm
Okay.
sorry that we crunched you for time so much. We definitely can bump this and make it the top topic for our next one, but please continue, but we do have to stop in about a minute.
Sounds good. Okay. Yeah, the main thing that I wanted to discuss and take away from this meeting is like what the condition should look like and how the network gates could be standardized. One aspect or one possibility that I can think of is like having like a standard prefix, like a network.kubernetes.io. As far as like net evaluation is concerned, this prefix doesn't change anything today, but this opens up to more granular readiness signals in the future. For example, imagining like a patterned toleration in network Kubernetes.io/star, that would mean that tolerating network readiness, like something more granular is possible in the future. So standardization is one thing that I wanted to discuss and get an app from SIG Network on this. And also the other thing is the integration paths. I think that like one way to standardize this is to have like a SIG node will have like client helper that would have a utility to update the node condition for specific daemon sets or plugins. And there will also be matching labels the kubelet will selected so that like upgrade flows and component rollbacks could be easily handled. So I think that like I would take a pass here and maybe get feedbacks and discuss other things as and when needed.
Roger that. Tim?
I had questions, but we don't have the time. I know Ajay will be talking, I think, later today, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I apologize for not having looked at this in depth. It's deceptively complicated how to make this all work.
Ajay, would you like us to put this on the parking lot for our next meeting so we can continue the discussion? And is there a good asynchronous place? Is this doc the best place that you linked for people to comment and take a look?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I will also share the link doc. I think I already added the doc at the
I see one on here.
agenda. Yeah.
Okay, I'll add this to our parking lot then, and then the doc is node readiness gates, which is linked on the agenda. Thank
So
you
in the last 0 minutes, I wanted to raise the topic. Thank you, Ajay.
Thank you.
I wanted to raise the topic. The next scheduled meeting of this group is the 19th, which is for some people a holiday. It is like Google has off.
Yeah.
The one after that is July 3rd, which is also a holiday for a lot of Americans, which means we're pushing July 17 as the next scheduled meeting of this, probably, unless we do June 19th and just deal with it, which, you know, is okay. I wanted to see if there's an appetite for shifting off by a week and doing like a 3-week cycle instead of 4.
If we don't go again until July 17th, we're missing enhancement freeze.
Enhancement freeze and code freeze, right? Enhancement freeze is like next week.
Yeah. Just double checking. People can't be available on July 3rd. I know July 4th is a holiday. I would be here July 3rd.
July 3rd is a holiday at Google anyway.
Okay.
So.
I don't mind showing up for it. Same with Juneteenth. I don't mind showing up for it. But I don't want to impose that on other people.
Roger that.
My vote would be to meet in the middle and do that kind of late June Thursday, whatever that is. So we have
like that's
kind of that
3rd,
3-week
or not the
cadence.
3rd.
26?
26th.
Yeah.
So just a one-off. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be out. I'm actually out of office through the end of the month, so I'll miss it either way. But I feel like the group should probably get together.
So should I cancel the one on Juneteenth and the one on July 3rd so people know we're not going to meet then, and just add the one-off one on the 26th? Is that
maybe just move the Juneteenth one back a week and cancel the
I
other
can do
one?
that.
I don't know.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Cool.
I'll do the calendar work.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Cool with that.
Send it to the mailing list too. Make sure the mailing list knows.
Roger that.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a happy Thursday.
Cheers.